So today I'm going to give a quick review of my air-to-water system on my C6 Corvette. Previously I was making about 800 wheel with a Vortec V3 Ti, and I just had an air-to-air. And this year I'm switching to an ESS GX3, which is kind of like middle ground between a YSI and like the V3 Ti. I chose to switch to air-to-water because I know with the V3 Ti and the ANA air-to-air, I was seeing the intake air temps rise quite a bit by the end of a pull. It would always recover quickly, but I would see a pretty big swing of intake air temps during the pull. So I figured with the upgraded blower, I'm going to be spinning that thing to its max impeller speed of about 70,000. So I wanted to give the air to water a shot. I know some guys say it's probably not going to be that streetable, but the way I set it up is I have the Shearer Fab 2000 horsepower air to water intercooler, and then out back I have quite a bit of capacity. I went with the 6.7 gallon Shearer Fab water tank, and then what I did to help with the street manners of the system is I put a Mishimoto heat exchanger up front. So this heat exchanger comes with 3/4 inch barbs. I actually took it, cut the barbs off, and had my neighbor weld on some 1-inch barbs. So I just got some 1-inch weldable bungs. I'll try to post a picture of that. But anyway, yeah, I went with a CWA 400 pump, which you can see the lines go through the back of the trunk. And then if you pull these two taillights out, the pump is actually mounted to the steel bumper inside the bumper cover. So from the intercooler pump, I ran the lines through the quarter, down through the rocker. And as you can see, they kind of sweep up here inside the fender and then dive under the headlight. But you know, the tricky part about the Shearer Fab intercooler that I went with, I actually got it secondhand off of Facebook, and when I got it I was surprised at how wide it actually was. I thought there'd be a little more room to make my connections for the water lines, and during the research process of putting this system together, I saw there was two guys that had used the exact same intercooler, and you know, one guy used some tight radius aluminum 90s that they actually welded directly to the intercooler, and were able to, you know, route the lines between the frames, frame rail, excuse me. And then another gentleman, he actually drilled the frame and went right through the frame, which, you know, I went back and forth between those two ideas, and I didn't really want to drill the frame, but also trying to track down tight radius aluminum 90s to weld on there was kind of tricky. I also didn't really want to weld to the intercooler. You know, I thought it'd be nice to have some adjustability. Once you weld those things on there, they're welded on, and it'd be quite the hassle to change it. But as you can see, I had little room to work with. Once you put those 16 AN fittings in there, there's not a lot of room. So I drilled the frame. That was no big deal. The unfortunate part was when I was building this system, you know, here in Wisconsin, it is super cold in the winter, and these lines were like rock hard. I actually had to use a heat gun to, you know, soften them up. And the hardest part of running the lines was this section from here to this area here, because of the headlight and the fender and the bumper. I got them tucked in there as tight as I could. I ended up, you know, shaving down a little bit of plastic that was not needed. Another issue I ran into was going from the intercooler into the heat exchanger. The hose wanted to keep collapsing and caving in on itself because it was such a tight bend. So I picked this little pipe up off of Amazon, and that fixed that problem there. I'm working or talking to a guy on Instagram, and he has a very, very similar setup. He got a 7-gallon tank from Extreme FM or CFM or something like that online. So he has a similar size tank, and then he had a intercooler custom made that's very similar in size to my intercooler. And he said when he's driving on the interstate or making pulls, his intake air temps only rise like 6 to 8 degrees, like hardly at all. So that's, I think, phenomenal. I was seeing like a 40 to 50 degree swing. So I'm hoping with the big capacity of the tank and then the big CWA 400 pump that I should be able to move enough water and keep this thing from heat soaking. I wanted to mention about the CWA 400 pump. So that pump has two versions. There's a LIN version and a PWM version. So LIN version is essentially like an on-off, 100% or not at all. And then the PWM, the version I went with, since I'm running a Haltech, I knew it would be easy to set up the variable speed with the PWM control. So I thought that'd be nice to, when I'm not ripping on it and high up in the RPMs, I can just let the pump run a little slower. And then when I get into the throttle and the RPMs come up, the pump can ramp up and keep the water flowing and keep those intake air temps down. I know the gentleman I was talking to on Instagram, he said that he went with 3/4 inch lines, which in hindsight, I sort of wish I had done, but the Shearer Fab tank comes with 16 AN bungs, and I figured why not try to utilize as big of lines as possible. So one of the other tricky parts about this system too was finding 90s that would turn and then not hit my door. I took the door off right now because I'm working on my battery setup here, but I wanted to make sure that when the door opened, it would clear the lines, and it's hard to find a 16 AN to 1 inch barb 90 that will clear that. And I obviously wanted the tank centered in the trunk. I wanted it to look visually appealing. So yeah, those lines, or the 90s, were not super cheap. And unfortunately they weigh quite a bit. I was trying to be mindful of the weight that I'm adding to the car. GrandSports are already pretty heavy, and those fittings weigh I think over a pound each. So all that little stuff adds up. So keep an eye out, because I will be posting an update of how the system truly works. I need to get a base tune on the car. I just installed a Haltech plug and play kit from Tuned by Sean, and he's going to be tuning the car. But once I get the car tuned and start logging, I'll be able to see how those intake air temps are doing with this system. I know earlier I mentioned a gentleman online, he said 6 to 8 degree intake air temp rise. I actually looked back at the message. It was only, it was actually 8 to 10 degrees. So not much difference, but still that's huge from what I was seeing, which was like 40, 50 degree plus intake air temp rise during pulls. Quickly recovered, but still that doesn't really matter when you're doing the pulls, when you want the intake air temps to stay low and not creep up or shoot up. Those intake air temps really matter on performance. So hang around, look for that other video. I'm going to be posting some other content here soon on the car as soon as I start doing the logs and tuning.